I'm talking about the Classics Illustrated version of Jane Eyre. It's basically a graphic novel. I'm not hugely into graphic novels, but I have read a couple. I especially find the idea of graphic novel adaptations of classic literary works to be pretty intriguing. So I definitely wanted to check this out. And it was only 60 pages long, so I could read it while I was waiting for cookies to bake. But, oh, that makes me sound so domestic. Not. To be honest, I'm not totally sure when this was published, because I found a copyright 2012, but I also found info in the back that said that the cover was from 1958. And I like this cover. Rochester in a dressing gown on green carpeted stairs with a pineapple banister in front of a stained glass window and flames in the foreground. It's so exciting! I just want to read that. However, that is not representative of the Rochester that you will find within these pages. And I realized that as soon as I got past page 1. I definitely got an old feel from this, and I don't mean like Victorian England old, I mean definitely a 70s vibe or something. The first few pages, as far as adaptations go, were pretty good. It has a little summary on the first page about Jane's situation, what happened to her parents, and why she's living with her aunt, and then, you know, it keeps a lot of good things. It keeps John's attack, and her being dragged to the Red Room, and Brocklehurst's visit, and Aunt Reed, and at least having a one-panel summary of those things was pretty good. So I was impressed with the first 10 pages or so, John Reed's blue hair aside. Then we get to Lowood, and there was like a whole page devoted to the burnt porridge. Check. Jane drops her slate. Check. Miss Temple's invitation to her room. Check. So we're speeding right along. 20 pages in. Good stuff. We get to Thornfield at page 20. And when you consider that the whole thing is not 60 pages, but is actually 50 pages with a bunch of extra stuff at the end, 20 pages out of 50 pages before you even get to Thornfield, that's nearly 50% of the book. So we're at Thornfield, and these illustrations just seem so low-key, both in color and in the drawing style. It's almost as if they were made in paint and not drawn by hand. It's very disappointing. Adult Jane's look is fine. She kind of reminds me of Joan Fontaine. Then she meets Rochester on page 23. More blue hair, pimpin' fur collar, and masterful sideburns. And that's pretty much all I have to say about Rochester. He and Jane have very few facial expressions, and their dialogue, the conversations, they leave a lot to be desired. And it's right around this point that I start to feel like, you know, you guys are doing really well, but you're starting to lose me. And maybe the turning point was the fire scene at page 32. Fire scene is abysmal. There are no impressive flames, and there's some odd coloring choices, and there's absolutely no romance at all. And then the story starts galloping. Next page, visitors arrive. Next page, Mason arrives. No gypsy scene. And during this whole part of the book, it's like they took the Bronte novel and they sucked all the romance out of it. So many little tidbits are missing. Rochester stopping her on the stairs, his wishing that they were on an island together. How are people supposed to know that this is a love story developing here? There are no clues. Rochester doesn't say anything, and Jane's not showing or telling anything either. There is no admission, there's nothing about watching him enter the room and not being able to tear her eyes away. Nothing! There's no... And that's gonna be a problem right about now. Mason's bundled off into the coach. Jane asks if Grace Poole is going to stay on, Rochester rushes off her concerns, and then in the next panel we get this little summary. One evening not long after, Mr. Rochester met me in the garden. His guests had all parted, but he spoke of his coming wedding to Miss Ingram. Suddenly he enclosed me in his arms, gathered me to his breast, and pressed his lips on mine. What? No, that's... no. Okay. First of all, there was no urgent visit to Gateshead to visit the dying old aunt. Second of all, there's no romantic setup for this at all. There have been no teasing conversations, no hints, no money flirtation, no glad to get back to you, sir, nothing. So if you have no knowledge of the story, this is going to be shockingly unexpected. Third of all, this makes it sound like Rochester was just standing there talking, being like, yeah, so I'm gonna get married, and, like, Blanche said that we can do this, and hey, you know what? you're looking pretty good right now. I think I'd rather marry you instead. Moi. And fourth of all, there's no argument. He says he wants to marry her, she asks if he's serious, he says he is, and that's it. No feisty Jane declaring her rights, no tears, no confessions, no accusations, no passion, nothing. Ugh. So, we get around to the wedding. Bertha looks like she's about 1.5 feet taller than everybody else. She also has blue hair, which is the same blue as Rochester's hair, which is the same blue as his wedding clothes, which is the same blue as Grace Poole's dress, which is the same blue as Jane's running away dress. Not really a varied color palette here. Jane leaves. There's no post-wedding persuasion scene. At this point, I wasn't really expecting one. She, quote, finds a home with St. John Rivers, a young parson and his 2 sisters. No explanation of how she found him. So it goes racing on to the end, and one of Rochester's eyes was knocked out. That's new. No visual for that, of course. She goes back to Rochester, who doesn't have a hideous scar. He doesn't have an empty eye socket. He accepts her proposal very easily, and then recovers sight in one eye. Baby, check. So they have this stuff in the back, and one thing says, now that you've read the Classics Illustrated edition, don't miss the added enjoyment of reading the original, obtainable at your school or public library. This whole graphic novel was kind of intended as a teaser trailer for kids, but teasers are supposed to make you hungry for the whole thing, and if I was 8 or 10 or whatever the age for this is, I would not go running to read the original because I'd be like, this is boring. And it's not that I have a problem with being a graphic novel for kids. I don't. I think that's a cool idea. It's a good way to get some people reading. I like that it can maybe pull in a few younger readers who might not go for a thick book. And I like the chance to explore a new medium. But I don't think that Jane Eyre is the right novel for that medium. I'd look for something with more action and adventure, or with ghosts and monsters. Something like Frankenstein, or Macbeth, or A Christmas Carol. Those seem like likely candidates for a graphic novel, and it has been done. Jane Eyre just doesn't lend itself to that. But in the back of the book, it does have a review of previous Jane Eyre graphic novels from 1947 and 1962. And even though I wasn't crazy about this, I would be willing to look at another one just because